fanatics, and welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon Wright. Tonight we've got a very interesting show for you. We're going to be joined by my guest, Jack. Jack has some experiences with the paranormal, kind of ties in with some religious stuff, so definitely want to jump in with that here in a second. Before we do, though, if you've ever had an experience and you'd like to be on Tinfoil Tales, you can send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com. We will get you scheduled for a future episode. If you'd like to help the podcast out, keep sharing it around. Leave us a 5-star review. You can find us on social media. Word of mouth is the best way to help the podcast grow. So if you want to help, all you got to do is share the podcast. Anyone that you can think that would enjoy it, family, friends, anybody, just share it. It's definitely the best way to get the word out there. I have a new book out. It is called Shadows of Cedarville. You can find it on Amazon. It is available in paperback and also in Kindle. So if that's something you'd be interested in, you can check that out as well. But we're going to go ahead now and bring Jack on. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I'd like to welcome my guest tonight, Jack. Jack, thanks for coming out and talking to me.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Definitely. Pleasure's mine. So a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am on my fourth incarnation. I started out as a aircraft mechanic during the Vietnam era, became an ordained minister, which I still am, but don't actively practice the pulpit anymore. After a bit as a hospice chaplain, I became a registered nurse, and I had to retire from that a couple of years ago, and I took up writing full time. I did a little bit of writing before, but now I write full time, and that takes up quite a bit of my time. That, and I also work for a publishing company.
Awesome. I actually just released a book this past week, and I did it through Amazon, so it's kind of self-published, but
Right.
I thought it was kind of cool. I just checked my stats just from Fridays when it came out. I've already sold 23 copies. Like, well, I guess that's decent for the fact that I don't really advertise it.
It is, yeah. A lot of people are. Like I said, I work for a publishing company, I'm actually a partner in the publishing company, and a lot of people have great expectations. They don't really realize how hard books are to sell.
Yeah,
Um,
especially
they are a little
today's.
bit harder than a lot of things, but they are worthwhile. And I started out doing self publishing. First couple of books, actually, first 3 books that I did were all self published. They were then picked up and edited by a publishing company after that. But yeah, to get on and sell 23 copies in the first couple of weeks, that's not bad at all.
Yeah, said it's only been 3 days. I was like, I expected to sell like basically nothing, but I'm happy that people have been picking it up.
Yeah, sounds like it's going pretty well.
What what sort of books do you write? Is it fiction or
Yeah,
what?
well, I've only written one nonfiction book, and it's a Christian devotional. But I've uh, I've got, what is it now? I've got 8 um, horror fiction books that I've written, and then 3 collections of horror short stories, 1 collection of Bigfoot stories, and then a series of 3 books that are just westerns. I say just western because I've got some that are a blend of western and horror. They're cowboys and Indians and werewolves. And I had a friend who read the books and she liked them, but she asked me one day, would you write me a western that doesn't have a monster in it? So I said sure. And it was coming up on November, and for the last 4 Novembers, in November they have a challenge called National Novel Writing Month. And the challenge is to write a 50,000 word novel in the 30 days of November. So I took up the challenge with her idea about a Western with no monsters. And for the last 3 years, I've done that in November. And so this November, I'll try and write the fourth one for her.
Awesome. Yeah. Weirdly enough, this book that I just wrote, I started it a week ago Friday and I finished it up Monday. So I had like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So it took 4 days and ended up being 152 pages, but it's just under 30,000 words.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah,
And
quite a pace.
yeah, I hyperfixate apparently, and when I start something, I don't stop.
Yeah. Well, Robert Louis Stevenson wrote Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde overnight. He was just on fire, and he got the book done. Of course, it's not a huge book, but most of mine are not. There, I run between 42 and 50,000 words for most of my books.
I would have liked to have went longer, but I just felt like I got to the point where I was kind of running out of ideas. I like my brainstorming was gone. So
Well, yeah, I've had people say, this short story should be longer. I don't know. The story's over. I've told the story, and if I to add anything else to me would kind of be taking away from it rather than adding to it.
I have ideas now that I've already put it out there that I was like, well, I could have done this and I could have changed this. I was like, well, I've already got it out there, so I don't want to mess with it. But um, no, ironically enough, it's you said you had stuff with werewolves. This was actually it's Shadows of Cedarville, and I used the Dogman lore phenomena, werewolves, whatever you want to call them,
All right.
as the plot outline with people having these encounters with these strange, upright, canid werewolves, whatever. And that's how the story goes off kind of in that kind of realm. But I thought it was funny that you just mentioned you had cowboys, Indians, and werewolves. It's like, well, that's interesting because I don't have cowboys and Indians, but I do have the whole werewolf lore going on.
Oh yeah, which is my favorite. The original Wolfman. I watched that as the young guy, and I've loved werewolves ever since.
Yeah.
Um, the biggest selling books I've got a 5 volume series. I'm actually writing number 6 right now, but they revolve around. Of course, they take place in Louisiana in Cajun country, and the Cajuns have one that they call the Rougarou, which is sort of a early French settler Native American mix of words for the French loup-garou werewolf.
Yeah. Didn't the French back, I think was it the 16 or 1700s, they hired someone to come out there and they made a movie about it at one point. They hired someone to come and kill this beast because they said there was a werewolf killing a bunch of people and livestock and stuff. I can't think of what the actual story's called, but I remember there was something going on in France, like right before the
Yeah,
1800s.
I'm trying to think of the fellow's name right now, and I can't think of it. But yeah, actually, yes, actual events that happened. Uh, they had trials. Actually, in that case, the fellow wasn't executed; he was put in an asylum. But uh, yeah, it definitely would happen. One of the interesting things of the trials in France at that time, um, the verdict was reached by popular vote in a lot of, and it kind of if you didn't vote for condemnation, then you were of course became suspect that well maybe you are a werewolf too, and that's why you didn't vote.
Yeah. It's almost like the Salem witch trials, too.
So yes, very much like it. Uh, France was a little more involved in werewolves about the same time that a lot of the witch lore and the witch scare happened throughout Europe.
Yeah.
France was more geared towards the werewolf, but it was the same type of pattern, same type of thing. When
Makes you wonder what actually they were seeing or what actually was going on for them to be that way. I mean, had to have been something to, I can't see them all just start blaming people because someone was killing things and like they made up some crazy story of a werewolf.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, a lot of cases that's kind of the way it went. Yeah, I mean, clinical lycanthropy is an actual modern day uh, mental health diagnosis, and it kind of revolves around the idea. Well, the idea from the old Wolfman story where the father tells him, well, in your mind, if it happens in your mind, there's no telling what can happen,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and that's still, I think, kind of the thinking.
You know, you'd mentioned some Bigfoot books as well. Does that
Yeah, I spent quite a while. Actually, the last 3 years I worked in the Pacific Northwest. I heard a lot of stories, um, and I incorporated all of those into fictional stories because a lot of the stories that I heard about Bigfoot were like simply sightings. Okay, I was at this place, this time, this was the situation, and I saw this thing. And then usually the course was I saw this thing and then I ran.
yeah.
Uh, so there's not a lot of story there, and I wanted to tell more of a story, so I would incorporate those things into a larger story. Actually, one of it's four short stories in the book, and one of them I spent a lot of time in that talking about the Native Americans from the Puget Sound area, their story of how Bigfoot was created and how he interacted with tribes, and that took in a big part of the story. And then of course I blended it in with different things that people have they had happen, and then some. I did one from Washington. I did another one from Oklahoma where I spent a lot of years. I actually found a case where there was a Bigfoot sighting in the town I lived in Oklahoma. I never heard about it at the time, but I found out later when I was researching for this book, and I incorporated that in. And then I did a kind of unique thing with one story. One story I told from Bigfoot's point of view,
Hmm.
how he got himself and his mate and his little one through the hardest winter ever,
Hmm.
and kind of what he thinks of people rather than what people think of him.
I've often wondered if doing this podcast and obviously the interviews and the sightings and everything else and all the people I've talked to and all the things I've listened to or read, I've often wondered what they could actually be seeing if this thing doesn't really exist. Like if it's misidentification or something like that. But part of me believes that there really is something out there. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I kind of, like I said, I've never seen one. Uh, the people that I've talked to, very sincere, very trustworthy, very sane people, and they had nothing to gain or lose by telling me. In fact, a lot of people, I should say, probably most people, if they actually have had an encounter or they've seen something, are very reluctant to tell you. And they usually won't tell you unless you kind of give them some kind of hint that you're um, receptive to hearing it. Whether you believe or not, if you're receptive to listening, they will talk to you. But otherwise, they don't often talk to you.
That's
And
I can completely relate. I had an experience, not so much Bigfoot related, but I had a weird experience myself years back, and I was doing this podcast. I never even talked about it up until this past summer. And the podcast's been going on for almost a year before I ever even said anything publicly about what went on with mine, just because there's a weird stigma about being labeled as a crazy person, essentially, because of the stuff you see and you can't explain it. And I'm a skeptic for the most part. So for me, it's like seeing something that shouldn't exist or doesn't make any sense, and then you try to rationalize it for 15 years of, well, it had to be this, had to be that, couldn't have been this, and then there's really no logical explanation. Even the one you have in your head to explain it away doesn't really make any logical sense. So you're kind of back at square one and you're like, well, maybe this is something that's not right. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it kind of goes that way with me. I mean, I'm by nature skeptical of most things, but if I hear something that kind of makes sense, and um, a lot of the things with Bigfoot, I've been around the people in that community long enough to discount some of the top reasons where they're just dismissed out of hand that as really not having any bearing. Like, you know, one of the big ones is guy said, "Well, I've been hunting in those woods for 20 years and I've never seen anything." And I've seen those, I've seen everything there is to see in those woods. And it's like, no, not really. The wilderness, that in most of these areas is so vast. Nobody's seen all of it. And in a lot of cases, nobody's reached some of the places that they have, that I talked to one fellow, for example, who lives in the Blue Mountains on the border of Washington and Oregon, and uh, he goes back as far as you can get back in with a vehicle, off-road vehicle at that, and then maybe hikes for 2 days further in there, and he doesn't get all the way in. But I mean, that's how far back he goes. And he did supply me with some of the one of the things I asked about the book because I was going to write about from Bigfoot's point of view is does Bigfoot really think? And I ask a lot of people who are into that community, tell me how you know Bigfoot thinks, because I hear people tell me all the time, they think. And so, and it took a while to, actually get through. I went through a lot of people before I actually hit on something that to me demonstrated rational thinking. And this guy's one of that. I enjoy, like I said, I enjoy hearing people tell me about it. And I actually did have one experience in the woods that some experienced Bigfoot people say, that was a Bigfoot. But I was out hunting in the woods one time, and I hunted in those woods a lot, and I'd been there, quite a bit. I was out hunting with a buddy, and we were walking back to our truck together, and we just got this creepy feeling in the middle of the woods that we were being watched and something was following us. We were well armed. We weren't afraid. It was, it could have been a bear. Absolutely could have been a bear. But that idea wasn't frightening at all. In fact, that idea might have a little bit of excitement. We wouldn't mind taking on a bear, but uh, this was just something completely unexplainable and unexplained. Why do we feel that way? And we got out of there as quickly as we could and didn't go back that again. What it was, I can't say. Like I said, people who have had Bigfoot experiences say, "Oh, that was a Bigfoot." I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I couldn't say that at
Yeah.
all with any confidence.
If you didn't see it, at that
Oh,
point, it's all just speculative of what it could have been. And
right. Yeah, yeah. There was no, there's no evidence that at all that it was. My thinking then, that's not an encounter. That's not an experience.
I think a lot of experience from people, they all have the same characteristics, and it's kind of similar. A lot of people actually don't see something or they hear things, they hear knocks, and I understand that it's some sort of activity, but then you have people acting like they're experts on something that has not ever really been, to my knowledge, scientifically proven to exist, but they know all about these things. They know how they communicate. They know how they do this. They know. I was like, you guys have so much knowledge on something that yet everyone doesn't claim they exist. Like there's no scientific proof they exist, but yet you guys are experts in this field of Bigfoot, but there's never been a body. Well, that's because they bury their dead.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they bury their dead. Okay, how do we know this? Like,
Well,
where's the proof? Where's the bodies that they buried? Who's ever uncovered a body? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
people have theories, but they act like it's the truth because they said so. And that's where I struggle when it comes to certain communities because everyone's an expert. of not knowing anything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That does happen. And, there is a part of the Bigfoot community that has some ideas that, I just absolutely cannot buy. Uh, and, I don't buy into it. I might be wrong, but I don't think so. And, you know, yeah, a lot of what people are studying, so a lot of it's speculation about what what this footprint means, or what this um, structure means, or what's this thing I saw, what it means. Uh, they're giving it their best guess. Of course, a lot of what we take for knowledge is that it's just people's best guess.
Yeah, that's how it is. I feel like with almost every topic that jump into on this podcast, I do stuff from
Yeah,
Bigfoot to ghosts to dogman to aliens to whatever. It's pretty much anything under this tinfoil hat can be a topic
yeah.
to talk about.
Well,
And
and that's basically, and that's the very definition of the two things, paranormal and supernatural, which to me are two different things. Uh, Paranormal is something outside of what science has proved at this point. Uh, at one time, television was paranormal, um, but paranormal is something outside of what science has proven. Supernatural is that which science cannot prove, and there are a lot of things that true scientists will tell you that science can't prove or disprove that one way or the other, and that's not science's job. Actually, they will tell you, that's not what science does. And so, yeah, when you get into those areas, I guess it's easy to say you're an expert, but
yeah, I feel like science lately though is being used as a way to discredit everything. And the original intent of science was to discover the unknown and to keep searching, but now everyone seems like they know everything, even when these scientists and doctors are like, oh, this can't be possible because of this and that. And they try and discredit anything being supernatural, paranormal, anything like that, just because it doesn't fit with the narrative of what science is today.
yeah. And I think a great deal of it has to do with, the old saying is seeing is believing. But I think, just the opposite is true too. Believing is seeing. I read that this one scientist was writing one time, and he says people who believe in ghosts see ghosts everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never seen one. I don't believe in them. I've never seen one. Well, maybe that's the reason why. That even if you saw one, you wouldn't believe it. Uh, I, I think that plays into it as well. That sometimes, no matter how much I might see or experience, I'm not going to, agree that that's so.
I think that is a lot of truth to it, though, just because people that I've talked to, and I don't want to come off sounding like ungrateful to anyone that I've interviewed or anything. That's not the case at all. But I feel like some of the people that I've talked with, they're so adamant about what they've seen, what they believe, they almost manifest this to happen. Like I've been contacted by people that have sent me photos and they say, "Oh, do you see this thing?" And it's like a dog man. I was like, "I'm looking at branches." Well, there's discoloration. It's in there. I just see
Mm-hmm.
a tree. Like they see all these things that I don't see. And
Yeah, that happened to me this last weekend. I was at a Bigfoot festival doing a book signing, and somebody showed me a picture. They said was a Bigfoot, and it looked like a big different colored blur to me. I couldn't. I wouldn't say, okay, this is something.
I've been lately telling people they need to live stream. Like that would be the best way they can try and prove something like, oh, I can only get a photo. Well, every photo that you ever see of these supposed creatures are blurry and they're never really show any sort of actual like detail of anything. Like I can take a photo of all sorts of things, and sometimes they're blurred, but you can still make out something. These things
Right.
look like they're taken from like a camera from like the early 2000s. I was like,
Yeah.
everyone has a phone these days with a decent camera that these photos should not look this pixelated. It's almost like intentionally done. I don't understand why every quality photo looks like crap.
Yeah. Yeah. There's not so much an excuse anymore. I mean, at one time you could say, well, I didn't have time to grab the camera, and a lot of these things that I've heard people talk about, they happen so quick that if you had to grab a camera or you didn't really actually have the phone about at the ready to take a picture, you're not going to get one.
Yeah.
Um, they don't last that long. Uh, the experiences that I've read and heard about, or they happen in a one case. I heard a story that these people, they were camped, and um, some were sleeping in a trailer, some sleeping in the back of the pickup that was hooked to this trailer, and a sudden weight came on the hitch that threw the people in the back of the pickup down to the tailgate and the people in the trailer up to the top of the trailer. And then it was gone. And by the time they got around to look to see what was there was nothing there. What of that great weight pressed down on the hitch? Who knows?
Yeah.
But something happened. Something happened that could not be, readily explained. And of course, there was no time to gather evidence for it.
I think if I was to ever encounter something again, in which I'll fill you in on what happened with me here off air, just because I don't like talk about it on air all the time. Everyone's
Yeah,
tired of hearing about it. But
that,
basically, I try to say this mentally, but I have a feeling it won't pan out the way I hope it would. But if I see something again, I want to try and video it, or I'm going to be the idiot that gets killed by chasing after it, trying to live stream it to prove that it exists, because everyone
yeah,
always tries to film and you get like 2 or 3 seconds and it's going away. Like, why don't you follow after it? Why don't you see where it's going? Like that's the only way you're going to prove something exists, when the camera only sees it for like a split second and then they just stand there and then it just cuts off. I'm like, no, if I've seen something crazy, I'm going to
yeah.
go after it to try and continue to document it. I'm not just going to let it
Oh,
disappear,
yeah,
because
yeah.
then everyone's just going to say, oh, it's fake. But then
Hmm.
you're, but then again, I'll be the idiot that gets killed, and they'll say it was fake.
Yeah, yeah. I understand that. The really the supernatural encounter that I had, I didn't tell anybody about that for a long time, and when I finally did, what I did with it, I took the story and I wrote it in the third person, as it was somebody that used a different name, uh, sort of changed the circumstances, but told the story. I was surprised when somebody picked it up and said, "Are you talking about you?"
That's
And
honestly
then I had to own up to it.
that's how my book kind of started. I used my encounter as like the first chapter to kind of set the tone of where the book went from there. So
Yeah,
my
yeah,
book's kind of loosely based on my own self, because the main character has an encounter and he starts a podcast to interview people and finds more information and starts going out looking for these weird creatures. It just goes from there.
yeah, yeah. That's kind of the way the writing goes. And I was talking to somebody over the weekend. The first Rougarou book that I wrote, I said it wasn't really based on an actual encounter, but the idea came from something that actually happened to me. And in the opening scene of this book, this fellow's getting up and he's going to work, and his dog is throwing a fit at the door, barking and growling and carrying on. And anyways, that actually happened to me. My little dog just went wild one time, barking and yapping. Although she was a yapper anyways, yapping at the door and carrying on. And uh, I kind of chased her away from there. But that's where the story was born. Is, well, what if there really was something out there? I did.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't look right away. But I finally went back and looked. There was nothing out there. But that's where the idea for the story was born. Was, what if there was?
Yep. I said that's where I used the first chapter or two to kind of build up the rest of the story, but I used it from basically my own encounter and what I do for podcasting as a way to launch the story.
Right.
I would have been able to write it in like 4 days had I not had something to go off of.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But now I have another book that I put out this past winter, but I technically didn't write it. I used the transcripts from some of the interviews that I had done last year, and I just kind of pieced them together for like different interview transcripts, and I just put them for like a printed version of the podcast interviews. So it's nothing I really did. All I did was just take the transcripts and put them together.
Yeah.
But
I mean that's kind of the way my Bigfoot book was. Like I said, I just pieced together bits and pieces of stories that people had told me for the most part,
you know,
and made a story out of.
yeah, it's basically all I did was like told people like, hey, I might use your interview in this book if that's cool. And they're like, they didn't care. So I just my
Yeah.
podcast host does translations, so I just had them translated in there, and I just had to put it all together. It took me a couple weeks to do it, but got it done.
Right. Yeah. That's how it comes about for sure.
But you'd mentioned some of your actual encounters and stuff that you've experienced or whatever. You want to dive into those? I know you
Sure.
mentioned something about when you worked at a hospital, and I know you said something about from the church you used to be at.
Oh yeah. Well, the hospital. I've got a character in a couple of my short stories. His name is Dr. Johnson, uh, and Dr. Johnson is an actual character from I encountered way. Uh, Certainly encountered his story in a little hospital in rural Oklahoma. Dr. Johnson was a young doctor working at this hospital, and one day he was brought in by the ambulance as a patient. And evidently, from what I can gather, he had been exposed to some kind of pesticide, DDT or something. Of course, that was absorbed through the skin. They brought him into the emergency room, and he died there in that hospital. And as far as I know, well, the hospital is not really open anymore as a hospital. It still functions as a healthcare clinic. But uh, when I left there in uh, 2012, Dr. Johnson was still around, although he died back in probably the 50s or early 60s. And the encounter that I had with him one night is that I didn't see anything, although some of the other nurses that work with me had actually saw this doctor walking around in a long white coat, no legs coming out from under the coat, and seeing him move around. But one night I was I was working, and because it excuse me, because it's a little hospital, I was in charge of the emergency room and the hospital ward itself. So I split time going back and forth between them. And so when nothing, on the rare occasion or so that nothing was happening in the ER, then I would walk and make rounds through the hospital. And this one night I went down one side of the hallway and I checked the patients that were in the rooms on that side, and everything was good. I turned around and started back towards the nurse station in the ER. And the very first room I came to, I walked in. I could tell right away that wasn't right because I knew the patient was on an IV and there was no light on the pump. And so I went over and I checked, and sure enough, someone had turned the IV pump off, and I turned it back on and got it going again, make sure that it was good. I went to the next room, same thing. All the way down the hall, every single room on that side of the hall, the IV pumps were off. So I went up to the nurse station ready to choose somebody out. And of course, the response I got, nobody had touched those pumps. And, you know, swearing to the angry charge nurse, no, 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 I didn't touch him. I didn't do it. And finally, one of the nurses said, I'll bet it was Dr. Johnson. And that's when I learned the story of Dr. Johnson, how he died, and that he still hangs around. And I said, "You've seen this ghost?" "Oh yeah, yeah. I've actually seen him." So it was sort of a ghostly encounter, although I didn't see the ghost. Certainly, something had been at work there.
Yeah.
But now, as far as something that I've seen in, it was 1986, 87. I was called to finish up my ministerial internship at this church, in a small church in South Central Oklahoma. And this church was laid out. It was a shotgun type building. The church sanctuary was on the south end, and there was a classroom, and then a kitchen and a big dining room behind that, and then behind that was the area where the pastor lived. And I went there to study, of course. And the first tour I took through the hospital, I got this really creepy feeling when we passed through the kitchen dining room area, and it kind of lingered even after that, as I was walking around on this tour through the church. And I asked about it, different people, and oh yeah, they'd felt that. They thought that same thing. And I wonder, well, why? What is it? Well, why does nobody do anything about it? Is it something something could be done about? I did watch different preachers that came there, and you could, as you watched them, having done the same job, I could see that their ideas, it was like their ideas were being snatched away from them, and a lot of me resorted to using notes when they preached. I always use notes, so it didn't. I can't say it affected me there, but finally the pastor left, and they asked me to be the interim pastor there, and I agreed. And then after a short time, I was elected as the pastor there, although most of the church members boycotted the election. I'm not sure they really wanted me, but they couldn't get anybody else to come, so they were kind of stuck with me. But things went okay church wise. It actually was fairly nice. We settled in there in the parsonage on the back end of the church. But the creepy feeling that we had there kind of continued to grow. And my daughter happened to go into the church sanctuary to play the piano one day, and she was in there, practicing on the piano, and it was in the summertime, and suddenly the doorway from the church back to where we lived swung closed. The heater kicked on by itself, and it just became unbearably hot in there in one heck of a hurry. And it frightened her so bad she finally ran from the church into back home, and ever after that would never set foot outside of the parsonage part of the building by herself. In fact, neither my wife nor any of the kids, part of that kitchen, there was a freezer there that we had access to, that we used the freezer because there wasn't room in the parsonage. So we used the freezer that was there. None of them would go into that room by themselves. And the hard part was that you had to cross the room to get to the light switch. And so that became my job. I had to walk across the room, turn the lights on, and then a couple of them would go in there and get whatever they needed. Um, and that went on for months. And after a while, it's the feeling sort of became more malicious as time went on. It wasn't so much of just being watched, but like, you could feel the hatred in the eyes that were watching you. And it, like I said, certainly frightened wife and kids. And I finally I got to the point where I was getting creeped out. And I'm a big coffee drinker, and I was so creeped out by it that I went one time during the daylight hours into the kitchen, got the coffee maker and moved it to my office because I always felt secure there, and kept the coffee pot in my office. So I didn't have to walk to that end of the building to make coffee when I got up. Uh, and it became very, very oppressive for us, until finally one day I was in the church itself, uh, praying and preparing for a Sunday service. And again, like with my daughter, the door closed that led from the church into the nearby classroom. And I happened to look over, when the door closed, and this figure materialized through the wall, and came towards me. It started out as a sort of a black, foggy figure in the shape of a human. But as it got closer and sort of lingered longer, it began to take on some facial features and sort of a flesh tone about the where the face would be. And it kind of just stood over me because it was up on a platform where the pulpit was, and I was standing down lower, and just kind of stood over me for a bit. Strangely enough, I wasn't afraid at the time. I was kind of afraid of it later, but I wasn't afraid at the time. In fact, I was kind of outraged, like, how dare you come in here? And it kind of hit me that this was the feeling that everybody had that had materialized, and it gave off this great evil presence. And I, no testimony to any spiritual power or anything that I had. I commanded it to leave, uh, in the name of Christ. And when I did, I felt this wind blow by me, like wind on your face. You could feel it and it went by. And then the back doors of the church rattled like they had been hit by a car. They just shook on their hinges, and it was quiet. And later that day, my wife said that whatever did something happen today? Said because whatever that feeling was, it was there. It's not gone, but it's a whole lot better. And so I said, well, I just kind of not answered at all and didn't say anything about it. Kind of wait to see what happened. Um, and about a week later, the same situation. I was in the church praying. Once again, this figure came through the wall in the same way, uh, and I again commanded it to leave. That time, I really thought the church doors were going to come off and just be blown off when it went by. Um, and like I said, again later that afternoon, my wife was, whatever it was, it's gone, isn't it? And I said, yes, it is. It's gone. Uh, and the amazing thing was that, after that happened, we got a lot of new people started coming into our church, but and which sounds like, a great end to the story, but it didn't really end there. And I think one of the reasons that the spirits were there in the first place is that some of the old ideas and some of the old crowd that were there began to get tense with new people coming in, and there began to be a lot of opposition to me being there as well. Uh, and so a few months later, I finally left and I went past another church. And the fellow that followed after me ended up closing the church, and the church was closed for I think a year before it finally was relocated to another building in town. I'm convinced those were uh, demonic spirits that had possessed the building. Been tempted a time or two to go back. The building itself, after the church left there and relocated, became a medical supply company. And I passed through town a couple of times, and I really, really wanted to stop and go in and ask them about that room. And, you know, did they have any creepy feelings about it or any strange things happening, but I just really never had the time.
It's kind of weird to me that if it's a church, like a holy place, it would have activity like that, especially if it'd be demonic.
It does sound strange, yeah. But a lot of things uh, sometimes happen within church that open the doors for that kind of thing,
Yeah.
and that wasn't the only church that I've ever really had a bad feeling about. Some of the things that went on there. I actually had not really. I don't really count it as an encounter so much as uh, I was pastoring another church, and I happened to I worked night shift as a nurse at the time, and then during the day I was pastor for the church. And one day I decided to take a nap while I was in there, and I laid down on one of the pews and went to sleep. And um, I just suddenly woke up out of there was no noise or anything like that, and I could feel like a presence standing over me. It wasn't quite visible, but definitely a presence there that gave me a really eerie feeling. And I tried the same thing, commanding it to leave. I don't. I really was on my way to leaving that church at the time, and I don't know that really ever left that building. But yeah, they churches can be some creepy places at times. It just depends on I think how tuned into it you are. I think what happens with a lot of people is they come in and for some reason, they just feel they don't fit with that church. And so they don't stay. I don't know that it goes beyond that with a lot of people.
I interviewed someone recently and they actually just bought a church to renovate it. And there were sections of the church like where they had the little stream, I guess, was built for their baptisms.
Mm-hmm.
And if I remember right, they've been having a lot of activity in there as well, which again I thought was strange that a church would be having some sort of weird activity like that. But I got thinking about it, and not every church is all happy. Like, especially older ones. Like, they've had instances that went on in the past that nowadays would be considered kind of, I don't know the proper word for it besides maybe brutal. But
Yeah, well, yeah, that's probably a good word for it. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you're right about that. Uh, you know, all kinds of things. I've had all kinds of things happen, and in defense of a lot of the people that are there, they're people are just people, and sometimes they get off on the wrong thing, and uh, it does open the door to supernatural kind of happenings because they're just the place is just tuned to that, and it can almost as easily be infested by bad things as good things.
I have noticed I have been in churches before here and there, and I'm not, if you listen to the past, I'm not like a super religious person or anything like that. I grew up, family goes to church, everything else. It never really was my cup of tea, and I don't have anything against anyone that is. So it just wasn't, church itself wasn't something that I went abided by because, to be honest, I feel like most of the people that go to church are only going to church to be seen in church. Like I want to go sin all week long and then go ask for forgiveness and go continue to do the thing. And they're mostly hypocrites, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like if they're God and everything else, you don't have to go to church to have a relationship that way. But point being, I've been into a couple different churches, and some of them do just have a very strange vibe about themselves. I don't know what it is,
Mm-hmm. Oh
but
yeah, definitely. I I
even
was a
older
travel
buildings
nurse
are that
for a
way.
lot. Yeah, I was a travel nurse for a lot of years, and some places are that way. Of course, my experience growing up was probably just the opposite of yours. I was not allowed to go to church. I would be in trouble if I ever got caught going to church growing up. Um, but now it's hard to get. But anyways, I like I said, I was a travel nurse for a lot of years, and there was actually one church I went in and sat down, and I was there maybe 5 minutes. The service hadn't started yet, and I said, I don't know what's going on here, but I'm leaving. And nobody said anything there. I mean, nothing went on. No church service went on. Nobody said anything. Nothing was going on. It was just the feeling that I got being there.
Like you weren't supposed to be.
Yeah, this is not the place for you to be. You need to get up and get out of here. And I did. And to
Yeah.
this day, I don't know what was going on there. But
Yeah. Any more of some of these religious types, or there's so many different denominations and offshoots of religions anymore that it's a gamble, I guess, to know which one you stroll into, because you don't know what exactly they're going to entail when you get in there.
yeah, that does happen in some places. And there is a move really within the church world today to make it that way. They are, I say, afraid, maybe not, but kind of afraid to stand up and say, okay, this is what we believe in. And I, I guess I was impressed before I ever started going to church or became a Christian. Uh, I happened to see a pair of nuns on the Phil Donahue show. They were being interviewed about abortion, and of course, their view on it was quite different from the crowd. And I appreciated the fact that one of them said, "Look, this is what our church believes. You don't have to believe that, and there are a lot of other churches you can go to." Now, I appreciate that kind of honesty about what's going on. And churches, you don't get that a lot from church. You have to dig, find out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I haven't really went to a church just to go to a church in I don't know how many years. I know a lot of my family go to church and everything else. And like I said, I don't fault anyone that does. That's fine with me. My parents still go every now and then, and
Mm-hmm.
they've taken my kids to some of the services here and there, and I'm fine with that. Doesn't bother me. I just know myself as I don't want to be like the people that I feel like go there. I don't want to be one of those people, if that makes sense. I don't want to be the hypocrite that I think they are. I don't know.
Yeah, I understand that approach. Yeah.
But well, Jack, is there anything else you'd like to discuss? If not, we can talk a little bit more about your books and where they can find your books at and everything else.
Oh, sure, absolutely. Well, one of the things I was going to add, and I've had this question asked to me more than one time, uh, is how do you, as a Christian and as a minister, write horror stories? And I find that very easy to answer, is because my stories are about the battle between good and evil. And, to me, horror is the best outlet to bring that story out. Um, One of the fellows does the audiobooks for my uh, Ed Landry series. He says that, I was attracted to your books because, yes, there's a rougarou, there's a monster in it, but that's not really what the story's about, is it? And I said, no, it's not. It's about the sheriff and how he deals with it and how he handles the crisis that it's caused, and not about the monster. It's never really about the monster. It's about how people handle facing the monster. And so that, that's kind of the that's kind of the way my books run. So, like I said, yeah, I did get criticism from people that, how can you write this stuff? And excuse me. My answer is it's easy. It just comes naturally.
Yeah. Now I can understand, like, especially if it's something that you're passionate about and you sit down and just start. Because like I said, I'm not a writer or anything like that, and I literally just took the weekend and started writing and just
Well, there are writers that are that way. There's a school, kind of a school of thought in writing, that there are what are called plotters, people who plot out their entire story and outline every chapter and what's going to happen. And then there are people like me who are called pantsers because they write by the seat of their pants. And that's what I do. I just sit down and start writing.
yep.
And it has to come to me. I tell people that that my characters talk to me, and they tell me what the story, how the story. I kind of have an idea about how it's going to end, but they kind of guide the story to it gets to that place.
Yeah. That's kind of
And,
what I started off with. Like, I had an idea of how I wanted to go, but getting to that point from point A to point B, like, just had to try and come up with some ideas and go back and
yeah,
re-edit it. And I was writing
yeah,
most of it on notes on my phone, and I was trying to send emails to myself and copy the emails over into Word, and I pasted stuff upside down and didn't make any sense. So I,
right, yeah, yeah. When I first started writing, I wrote in composition books. And then I had arrows going all over, move this paragraph here, move this sentence this way. And it got so confusing that finally I gave in to technology and found cutting and pasting was a whole lot easier.
yeah, so that was a learning experience because what I thought made sense when I actually put it in there and everything else, I started to try and read it. I was like, oh, this don't make sense. And then I took all to go back. I published it and then realized that there was a couple things that didn't make sense because spell check didn't find things wrong
Mm,
that I noticed after I went back
right.
and because I put it in audio format just to listen to it. So it sounded like a computer reading it to me, but I've saved it as like a 3 hour long story. So I was listening to it, I was driving and
Hmm.
I took notes of where stuff sounded weird. So I went back in and edited it and fixed it. And now everything that's out there is the correct version. So
Yeah, I did that. I did that the other day with one of my books. I listened to we put it out for auditions for audiobooks. And I got an audition and I was listening to the audition and they were talking about uh, his laptop computer, and I thought, oh, I think I messed up. I don't know that laptops were available when this story took place. I, I went back and researched. It was something I didn't research because it's just something that comes natural now.
yeah.
But I did go back and research. Okay, and I felt better. I said, okay, there were laptops.
Yeah, I
Uh,
noticed that the other day too on mine. I said he was driving a pickup, and for whatever reason, pickup was capitalized. And then
oh,
in the next like two sentences down, it said he was driving a car. I was like,
yeah.
I had to go back and fix that. I was like, well, is he driving a truck or a car? Because it makes no sense at this rate.
Yeah, yeah, we've done that with, like I said, I work for a publishing company. I do a lot of the uh, first editing on stories that we get, and but I'm especially grateful for my editor because she is absolutely fantastic at picking up. If you do something like that, if you talk about a pickup to start with, and now you're in a car, she'll call you on it, say that this doesn't make sense or the timeline doesn't work, you can't do all this in this time frame, uh, you know and different things like that, so that that keeps me on track with that. Very good.
I'm not. It's strange for me because I'm not even really much of a reader. Like I am and I'm not. Like I read stuff online or I read it on my phone, but sometimes I like to drive and I'll play like audio stuff because I drive a lot for work.
Right.
And if It's strange I do a podcast because up until I started doing this podcast, I didn't even really listen to podcasts. I thought I had an original idea of what I wanted to do, and I found out that there's a lot of people that do the same type of podcast that I do. So I was like,
Yeah,
well, I guess I'm not that original.
yeah. I got one author that submitted a manuscript to us, and uh, she was saying she never read anything because she didn't want to mess with her original ideas, and wanted to tell her that you don't need to worry about that. There are no original ideas. Uh, in
Yeah.
writing, writing basically boils down to two things: either somebody new comes to town, or somebody's going on a trip. You can you can kind of boil just about everything down to that, and it's just finding variations on it and uh, telling the story the way you want to tell it.
Yep. Someone asked me today if I'm gonna write anything else. I was like, I don't even know. This is literally my first attempt. I was like, I'll see what happens. I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing half the time. I end up using like I think it's called Grammarly or whatever. I
Oh
downloaded
yeah,
a trial version of that just so to see if it would pick up any like grammatical errors or whatever. Because I'm not like an English scholar or anything. I haven't been in school for 20 something years, so it's like
yeah. Well,
trying
I think it was Peter Benchley that said, by the time you realized you didn't know how to write, said I was too famous to stop.
to make
So,
sense.
I guess that works. But yeah, I mean, it does work that way. Like I said, my characters talk to me. I've had one book that uh, I stopped and rewrote the beginning to it about 4 or 5 times, and then I wrote three endings to it because the basic characters didn't like it. And it kind of amazed me because to me, my characters are real people, sort of. They're in my head, but they're real people, sort of, so to speak. But after about the third book in the series, I got other people were like writing reviews on Amazon or writing me emails and saying, uh, "We're concerned about Ed Landry, and he never gets the girl. We're concerned about his love life." it's, so the next book I gave him a girl. Actually, I gave him two girls to fight over him. But
Yeah.
it kind of amazed me that okay, they're why do they feel this way about him? It's like I understand why I do, why other people. That was just amazing.
Yeah. I might if your books are on audibles or whatever, might start checking them out. It gives me something to listen to while I'm driving.
Oh yeah, most all of them are on Audible. Um, like I said, the big series I have is the Ed Landry series. They're the best selling ones of them. The fifth one of those we're working on the audiobook right now. But
I
yeah,
actually
we
had
we found a way to get into audiobooks, and we do very well with them.
I actually had someone just ask me because I posted up on Reddie. There's like just because it deals with dogman and werewolf stuff, so I went to two specific Reddits for werewolves and one for dogmen, and I posted it in there that I wrote this book. And someone asked me if I'm going to have an audio version of it. I was like, I don't know anything about that. I don't even know what I'm doing. I literally just wrote it, made artwork for it from an AI generated app, and
Hmm.
got in Photoshop, put it together how I wanted to put it together, and uploaded it. And I was like, as far as I know, it's up there. So I don't know if it's doing good or bad. I just checked a second ago and it says I've sold 29 copies now. So, I mean,
All right, very good.
yeah,
Yeah, actually, maybe after we're done recording, if you want, I can kind of steer you how to go audiobook.
yeah, that would be my next
Oh,
thing is how to do that. My other thought process was I was just going to do it myself and upload it on YouTube, but then no one would buy the book if they just go and listen to it on YouTube.
mhm.
So,
Yeah,
but
we had an option to go have our books read on as a serial on podcasts, and we kind of turned that down in favor of the audiobooks because they're just easier to find. And like I said, people that drive a lot, it's a whole lot easier for them to find the story that way.
yeah, when I go to certain locations for my job, because this project that I'm on right now literally is all over the state, so it might take me 2 hours just to get to one location. So
Right. Yeah.
it gives me plenty of time to just listen to stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and we're finding, more and more people say that. I don't sometimes, we get, I don't have time to read. But I spend a lot of time driving, so I'm starting to get into audiobooks. And, you know,
Yeah, that was the one thing that I have enjoyed. I'll say the past summer, or whatever, is just listening to stories that I find interesting that I don't have the time to sit and read. I've got 4 kids and they all do sports, and
yeah,
there's all sorts of
yeah,
stuff going on outside of work, and I work a job and then I have this podcast. I was like, I don't have time to sit down and read.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've been there with my writing. I had all these things, that demanding attention
You know,
and good things, but still, it doesn't leave you a lot of time um, in my case, pursuing writing or whatever. I did, like I said, managed to get 3 books through and self-published. I enjoy having the time now that writing is uh, my main job now.
I would enjoy if my podcasting was a main job, but I don't even make money from this because I don't want to. I'm too self prideful. Maybe is the incorrect term, but I don't like when I listen to podcasts and I hear advertisement after advertisement after advertisement. So I won't put
Right.
advertisements on this unless it's something that I actually believe in and like they want to endorse it and I'll talk about it or something. That's one thing. But when it comes to random generated ads, I don't. The
Oh
likelihood of
yeah,
making much money off that's not worth it.
yeah. I agree with you there. That's absolutely.
I've been hearing stuff from podcasts that I kind of liked and never had ads, and they've been having bombardments of advertisements the last couple episodes. So I kind of quit listening. I was like, it's annoying.
Yeah, yeah,
So if I'm getting annoyed, I don't want people to get annoyed with mine. So I'm still holding out on selling out, I guess.
yeah, yeah. I find that on the movies that I watch on streaming channels, and they're free with ads. Like okay, and the first couple of breaks for a commercial, there might be 1 ad or 2 ads, but as you get further into the movie, there's 7 or 8 ads every time there's a break.
Yep. We we got rid of DirecTV and went to Hulu, but we don't have ads, so I pay a little bit of extra for it because I've seen we had another streaming with ads prior, and there was just ads after ads after ads. I was like, yes, I don't like
Mm,
this.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah,
definitely a detract whatever you're trying to watch or listen to.
yeah. Well, I think we can wrap this up if you want to let everyone know where they can find your books and go from there.
Abs- Absolutely. All my You can find all my books on houseofhonorbooks.com. And there are with the books on there, the ones that are on audio are marked on there, and you can listen to a free sample of the book on the publisher's website. My website is jacklafountainauthor.com, and most of the same things are available there. Uh, you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com or author Jack LaFountain, and welcome. I do write 2 blogs a week that are I post on the Facebook page,
Right
and then
on.
I do also write some blog posts for House of Honor books as well. Those are both basically on writing. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Well, again, anyone out there listening, I definitely recommend you check out Jack's books, especially if you're into the Rougarou and the werewolf lores of Southern United States. I know that's a couple, and then you had their cowboy and your Indians and a werewolf. So
yeah,
that piques my interest just because of the setting.
yeah. That's yeah. If you're interested, it's 1870s North Texas along the Red River. Yeah, the Red River series is is the place to be for that.
Awesome. Again, Jack, I appreciate you coming on here and talking with me. It's been a pleasure.
Oh yeah, I've loved it. Great time.
Anyone out there still wants to be on an episode of Tinfoil Tales, just send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com and we'll get you scheduled. But on that note, we're going to roll out. So thanks to Jack and thanks for listening. Remember, the truth lies in the stories we share, the connections we make. Stay curious, stay open-minded. Thank you all for joining us on this journey. And until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep exploring the unknown. Good night, everyone.